Oh, cool. Hey, come on, Brian. Try it with me. Things got crazy so fast!
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yoda Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans. Oh, here we go, baby. The collapse. We need to have some pretty serious conversations today, man, about the Los Angeles Chargers and what's going on in 2022. Everything that we witnessed yesterday in the game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, let me start by saying that, yes, we got stomped by the Jags, okay? And Jags fans, I know we're going to see a lot of them in here today. You have a legitimate reason to celebrate, man. Your team is on a strong upward trajectory. I feel like your future is bright. And this video is in no way intended to dismiss the elite performance by Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. You know, they played a near-perfect game. But this video is going to be a little bit different from my normal post-game reports that I come out with on Mondays. Because for Chargers fans, this team is in turmoil right now. And we must take action before it is too late, because I do truly believe that this is an important year for the Chargers, for Justin Herbert, for this coaching staff. We really have gone all in. And it's not too late to turn things around, but action must be taken. We're down bad, but we're not out. And even I have to admit, things could get worse before they get better if action is not taken immediately. So here's that list of what I think those actions are and why this conversation is going to be so important. So before we do get started, guys, as a reminder, and hopefully as a pick-me-up, we do have a giveaway going on right now for this signed Antonio Gates jersey. All you got to do to enter for this one is hit up the link in the description, follow the instructions there. Very simple. And make sure you are subscribed. Only subs can win. As well as we are also giving away this signed LaDainian Tomlinson jersey to one of my crew members as a thanks from me to you guys. All you have to do to enter for this is be a member of my crew, and that's it. We'll be drawing the names here in the next couple of weeks. Also, keep in mind, guys, tonight is Monday Night Football. If you guys want to get in on the action on Underdog Fantasy, be sure to use code DIRECTOR when signing up to match your first deposit up to $100. Should be a good one. And with that, let's get into this one. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this one. It's going to be a very important conversation today, Chargers fans. Lights, camera, action. The collapse, a Chargers versus Jags emergency response. Now, like I alluded to at the top of the video, this video is going to be a little bit different than my normal post-game reports because there is a lot to talk about in this one. Of course, the Jags played a great game. Their future is bright, but the Chargers on the opposite side of the spectrum, they have a lot of work to do as well as, challenges to overcome, especially when it comes to their health. And that's where we're going to start in today's video, the injury report. Now, flat out, it sucks. Sometimes things are going to happen in sport, in life, that you don't have any control over. And for one of those things, it's going to be injury. Yes, you can control how prepared you are for that, in which I think the Chargers fell just short in terms of their depth. But you cannot control who goes down because this is a contact sport and things are going to happen. So let's start off with listing who is injured for the Chargers right now. Everybody take a seat, grab a bag of popcorn, get ready because it's a lengthy list right here. It's going to take a second. To start things off, Joey Bosa down with a groin injury in this game. And again, after each name that I list, we don't have the full information on all these players and when we can expect them to return. But I'm going to give you guys my spitball guess, I suppose. Again, I've been watching football a while. I've kind of seen these injuries on and off, with other teams, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll give you guys an idea of what I think. But again, I'm in no means of an official source. So this is just a guess on my part. So Joey Bosa with the groin injury. I don't think this is a season-ending injury by far. I've seen these injuries in the past, but they are, I will say, a very lingering issue, right? These things tend to last a while. If I were to spitball, I think the last time, or in my research, I saw that, Clay Matthews went through something similar, also playing at the edge. And he was out 3 to 4 weeks, if I remember correctly, in terms of what the expectancy is in the return for an injury like that. But again, it's something that's going to linger, I think, even past that recovery time. So again, spitballing here, I'm going to say 3 to 4 weeks is when we can expect to see Joey Bosa back. But again, that's a total guess. Now, the other guy that we do have confirmation on is going to be Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater went down in this game with a bicep injury, and we have since been confirmed that that is likely going to be a season-ending injury. Of course, that's a huge blow to the Chargers. This is one that's going to hold, big repercussions for this team going forward. Rashawn Slater being one of the best, offensive linemen in football, playing one of the most, if not the most important position on that offensive line in football. This is going to be felt, and this is going to be one of those situations and one of those issues that the Chargers are going to have to address immediately, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. Next up, we've got Corey Linsley, who is down with a knee injury. I think at this point he's week to week. Hopefully he returns sooner than later. We've got Donald Parham, who's down with a hamstring injury. I think he's going to be back sooner than later, as well as Keenan Allen, also with a hamstring injury, who is also week to week. I would also expect to see him maybe back as soon as next week. We also have Jalen Guyton, who's got a knee injury. Not much to say in that one. He should have been taken out of the game a lot later than that, especially him, and we'll get into all that in just a minute. You got J.C. Jackson, who's down with an ankle injury. He's also week to week. Again, I was expecting to see him back in this game. I think because the Chargers decided to play him in week 2 versus the Kansas City Chiefs, that maybe it did linger that just a little bit longer. I would expect to see him back as soon as next week versus the Houston Texans. And then Kenneth Murray did get shaken up a little bit. Yes, a very, very long list, but the bright side is, I'll just say there is a bright side coming here, okay? And that's going to be the next topic of discussion here, the injuries discussion, okay? So like we talked about, again, there is a bit of a silver lining coming up. Don't worry, Chargers fans. We're going to be trying to view this from the scope of, identifying how bad the situation is, because the situation is really bad, not just in the side of injuries, but, a lot of other topics as well. But there is hope. There is hope that the team that can turn it around with some diligent actions that need to be taken. And we're going to go over that throughout the entirety of this video. So let's start off here with the injuries, which again, you can chalk up to bad luck for the most part. You cannot control that. It's going to happen. But I understand it's frustrating, and it's especially frustrating seeing the injury bug return to the Chargers, which we're not unfamiliar with, but in a season where we are all in. The Chargers this offseason, one of the biggest hype seasons I can ever remember because of how much the Chargers loaded up. We went all in. We spent that cap. We loaded up on defense. We loaded up on offense. This team was looking really good, and then all of a sudden it falls apart because teams and players just cannot stay on the field. And all of a sudden, all these Pro Bowlers that you had all over the roster is whittled down to just a few. And that's going to take a big hit on your season hopes. So let's take a look at it for what it is, right? We're down bad for now. Likely to return this month if we were to be taking a look at this from, okay, it's bad right now. It's probably going to still be bad next week versus the Houston Texans. But also look at it from the scope of realistically what we're dealing with here, okay? So on the bright side, okay, likely to return in the next month or so, right, is Joey Bosa. That's pretty huge. The Chargers, Joey Bosa, we're going to need him, especially for the second half of these games, right? Also, likely to return any day now. Keenan Allen, J.C. Jackson, Linsley, Parham. These guys will be back sooner than later. Again, a lot of these guys maybe as soon as next week. And at this point, I'm starting to say, okay, I'm coming around to hope a little bit. We're going to have a lot of these guys back on the roster. Of course, we lost for the season Rashawn Slater. That is also a huge deal. But in the wide scope of things, this may not be as bad as what we once thought. Maybe not as bad as what it looks like on the surface. The Chargers very banged up right now, but most of those names will be back sooner than later, right? So next we got to take a look at our situation with these injuries. As far as the injuries are concerned, the timing does suck. We want to make sure we go all in with this team, have a successful season, but everybody goes down. That blows. But it's also a strangely favorable spot for the Chargers, and it does have a lot to do with the schedule, okay? Right now, the Chargers up next for this team is the Houston Texans, Cleveland Browns, Denver Broncos, Seattle Seahawks. Week 8, we have a bye. The Atlanta Falcons, the San Francisco 49ers, and then finally we have our rematch with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think everything, is going to lead up to that game versus the Chiefs in Week 11. That is the span of time that we have to get this team on track. Of course, we're going to be playing the Broncos as well. That's going to be a very big game. Every single one of these games is going to be an important game going forward. And, with the current state of the team, none of these games are safe by any means. But this stretch of games is the softest by far on our schedule. You guys picking up what I'm putting down? It could be worse. If the Chargers schedule was flipped and we were going up against some of the better teams in the NFL, there would be little to no hope that we make it out of these games with any, handful of wins. I think the Chargers, again, with the state of the injuries, the players that are coming back, they may be able to scrap together a pretty nice little pocket of wins because of the schedule that we have here in the next, 5 to 6 weeks. Not too bad. It could be a lot worse in terms of the schedule. If the Chargers can figure something out, especially coaching-wise and offensively, we'll get to that in a second, we may just survive 4 or 5 of these weeks, to buy this team a little bit of time to heal. That's a big deal, right? Bosa should be back sometime, between, let's say, week 7 or 9 after the bye week. That's pretty good, man. That gives us Joey Bosa, at the very least, back for the Kansas City Chiefs, who we're going to need for that game. If this team can get healthy and find a rhythm offensively, we just might be ready to face, the harder slate of games in the second half of this season. The Chiefs, the Cards, the Raiders, the Dolphins, who have been a rising star in this league, the Titans, the Colts, the Rams, and then finishing out the year with the Broncos. That's the half of the year that really counts. Of course, every game counts, but you know what I'm talking about. That stretch of games is going to be a lot harder than the stretch of games we have coming up for the next, 5 or 6 weeks. But to make the postseason, I'm guessing, again, because these first stretch of games are going to be important, I'm guessing that we're going to need to be somewhere around 6-4 before facing the Chiefs again in Week 11. And I get it. The Chargers and our hopes for our record this year may have been shattered because of what we've been seeing from the coaching and the offense, all of that, and mainly because of injuries. But it doesn't mean that this is a throwaway season all of a sudden. We're Week 3 into the 2022 year. We have time to sort this out, but action needs to be taken. And I think if we can make it 6-4 before facing the Chiefs again in Week 11, there may be a shot here. There is a bye week in there, so it's going to be something like 6-3 or 5-4, right? So somewhere around those lines, if the Chargers can, be positive at that point, have a game or a win ahead of the loss column, I think we'll be okay because we'll have most of our players back at that time. But to survive these games, we're going to need to make some serious changes. Okay, the team's going to have to take some serious action. So let's start off with what these actions are going to need to be, man. And again, it's a long list, but it's by far and away not impossible, okay? The Chargers have the power to do something about this. The worst thing they can do right now is nothing. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen with the Chargers in the past, but we have too much on the line this season. Now, speaking of the line, nice transition, director. We need to talk about this offensive line a little bit, okay? And we do see Rashawn Slater on the screen still because it is relevant. This is where we need to start in terms of turning the season around. The Chargers offense has just been awful these last couple of games, right? We'll get to Lombardi later. I know a lot of people are going to be asking about that, and I promise you he'll be in this video. But for right now, we need to try and stop the bleeding up front. This is a big, big issue for this offense because this offense, which finished top 5 last season, needs to sort some stuff out, and I think it starts on that offensive line. Right now, we're down 2 of our best offensive linemen, Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater. One of them is going to be gone for the rest of the year, and that sucks, right? That's a big problem. But luckily, Corey Linsley will return eventually, maybe as soon as next week. And you know what? Corey Linsley, I think if you take a look at the numbers and you take a look at the effect he has on this team, that's a big deal. The difference in the efficiency of our offense when he's on the field versus he's off is pretty dramatic. And having him back is going to be a huge, huge help to this unit, I promise you guys. So the bright side there is Linsley will return. The communication between quarterback and center and offensive line, that's going to be patched up as soon as number 63 gets back on the field. And that's a really big deal, okay? But as far as our left tackle issue is concerned, we've got to fix that fast. I'm talking like this week, Chargers. You guys have got to get something moving right away because that is a huge, huge issue. For right now, you guys remember what happened last night? Rashawn Slater goes out. Storm Norton enters into the game. He plays a handful of snaps. And the result was pretty predictable. It was predictably bad with Storm Norton out there on the field. He gave up so many pressures. The line looked like a shadow of its former self. It was awful out there. You cannot go into the rest of the season with Storm Norton at left tackle. That is a recipe for disaster. We cannot go into week 3 this way. I know that, it's a pretty quick in terms of turnover and getting somebody into, the locker room and trying to get them, situated with the team and the scheme and all that. But like the Jags, I view the Houston Texans as a sneaky good team on defense, especially on that defensive line. We cannot go into that game without having an answer at left tackle. And for this, I think there's a few things that could happen in order to address that. For one, option number one, right? Move Matt Filer to right tackle. Again, it's a story as old as time, but it's one that we have to consider. You move Matt Filer to right tackle. You elevate Jamari Sawyer to left guard, who I think is a more than capable guard at the position. And then you move Trey Pipkins to left tackle, which he was playing last season. Boom! That's an on-the-roster solution. Am I super confident in this fix? Not really. I think there's some issues here, guys. And this is why I think, maybe this isn't the best move for the Chargers right now. And I think it lies with Matt Filer a little bit. Filer hasn't been the same player this year as he was last season. He's declined pretty hard, right? And to see those issues on the line, especially with how many players are going down, is very discerning. On one hand, I feel that, Filer would definitely be a better option. Let's say Storm Norton. Let's say the Chargers do move Matt Filer to right tackle. They move Trey Pipkins to left tackle. That's a much better option than starting Norton at right or at left tackle, right? And it shouldn't be too hard for that solution to be better than having Storm Norton out there. And additionally, I feel like a move for Matt Filer could, in fact, maybe help him find new life on the offensive line and the outside. We've seen him play very well at the position with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But on the other hand, and again, this is more of the obvious observation for me at least, moving a struggling guard to tackle also seems like a bad call. Last week before, whatever, moving him to right tackle did not seem like a bad idea because we're going off of what we saw last year. This year, to start things out, with how Filer is struggling, I don't know if I make that move. Either way, though, if that results in Trey Pipkins blocking Justin Herbert's blind side, I would be okay with it. We got to get somebody other than Storm on the blind side. You could even switch those guys for now as a start. But the whole idea of moving Matt Filer to right tackle, I think the chances of that went down because of Matt Filer's performance so far this season. So what do we do, Director? Well, here's option number two. You guys know this man, Eric Fisher. Eric Fisher right now is a current free agent. And I think you guys know where I'm going with this. Option two is to go sign Eric Fisher or Darrell Williams right now. I'm talking get on the phone with their agents, make sure they're on a plane to LA. I want them here by tea time, dude. We need one of these guys in the building today. This is something that we've been asking for since the early part of the offseason as well. Go out there and get a right tackle, I think was the narrative. And it's time, man, especially now with the left tackle situation. Eric Fisher, we haven't talked much about him because, of course, we had Rashawn Slater. There's really no need for a left tackle on the team right now. Eric Fisher's a decent left tackle, who by no means is as good as Slater. Okay, we're going to get that off the table right now. But I feel like Eric Fisher can do the job, especially a lot better than Storm Norton at this point. And that's a move that the Chargers just have to make. I think that there's really no choice at this point. You cannot go into the rest of the season with no left tackle. At this point, you'll have a traffic cone on the left side with Storm Norton. I hate bagging on Storm Norton, man, but every single time we saw him out there last night, it was a disaster. We saw that disaster for the most part last season. I don't want to relive that. It's a necessity at this point. Go get Eric Fisher if you want to keep the line intact the way it is, but you need a guy on the blind side. Go get Eric Fisher. Now, Darrell Williams, on the other hand, the right tackle, I think that's also a great signing, right? Fill him in at right tackle, move Pitt to the left side. I think that's a pretty good solution. And I'm fine with both of these moves, right? But I actually favor the Darrell Williams signing just slightly more, as I do think at this point Trey Pipkins is our best option at left tackle between him and Eric Fisher. I think Trey Pipkins might be the better option just because he's more familiar there. He's played there last season. He's elevated. We know that he's pretty good. As with Eric Fisher, we don't know. I mean, he could be good. I know he'll be better than Storm, but I think right now the best option at left tackle is going to be Trey Pipkins. And for that reason, I think I do actually favor bringing in Darrell Williams, who can play right tackle, and maybe play it a little bit better in terms of run blocking, which the Chargers also desperately need help in right now. So at this point, I think Pip is our best option at left tackle. Let's go get Darrell Williams, but I would absolutely be fine with an Eric Fisher as well if that's what they decide to do. I think that's the best option on the left side. You combine a move like this with the fact that Lindsley will be back at some point, I believe the Chargers can salvage the season from the offensive line perspective, right? We can move forward from this. But it's the one thing the Chargers absolutely cannot do is do nothing. That's the one thing that the Chargers cannot do here. If you do nothing, and you leave Storm Norton on the left side, Trey Pipkins on the right side, and you just hope for the best, you're putting yourself in unnecessary danger. If you leave the left tackle spot in the hands of Norton, I guarantee our offensive line struggles will continue, if not get worse. And with a quarterback, especially like Justin Herbert, your franchise guy, battling a rib injury, that likely will not heal, let's say, until November, right? At least fully. This is a risk that the Chargers just cannot take. You cannot do that right now. This season, I dare say, even next season, could hinge on the Chargers' willingness to protect their franchise quarterback right now. You've got to get a solution on that offensive line today. And that's why that's going to be the biggest issue for me right now. Next up, we got to talk about the play calling a little bit. I know a lot of people are here to hear what director has to say about Mr. Joe Lombardi. You know what? I think Lombardi has had some good moments, right? Especially even this season, right? I think the loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, I did not credit as much to him, but I do think he had a hand to play in it, right? I'm always weary of fans, even myself, looking for a scapegoat, right? Looking for somebody to blame. And I really try to veer away from that whenever I can. But that being said, I'm starting to get enough information, have enough of a sample size to form my own opinion on the whole Lombardi situation. Okay, Joe Lombardi, it's time to talk about this man. Last week, we suggested maybe a hot seat situation could fall on the lap of Joe Lombardi with another, let's say, less than average game. This was a very poor game that we saw on Sunday versus the Jags, and it's here, right? That time has come. I want to say, for the most part, well, Joe Lombardi didn't cause all these injuries, or what do you expect him to do with all these superstars going down with Justin Herbert hobbled? Well, at this point, unfortunately, that's not good enough for me anymore. Because the fact is, I did see very many calls that contributed to the collapse in week 3. But I believe things can change, right? I believe Joe Lombardi can change. But the question is, do we have the time to wait right now? Going into this week, and this may seem a little narcissistic for me, but I'm going to say it anyway, okay? Going into this week, I laid out a very clear plan of attack that I felt would work in our given situation. You got Justin Herbert out there playing with injury. You need to protect him, but you also need to attack this Jacksonville defense in a very specific way. And again, I'm not an X's and O's guy, but from my perspective, I think it made a whole lot of sense to view this game this way. Don't put Herbert in danger. Let the playmakers make the plays, attack the underneath part of the field, and at worst, make sure Eckler is ready and available on all passing downs. Because in the end, I feel like the Jags are amazing versus the run. You're going to have to pass, and you're going to have to come up with something pretty creative in order to make sure that passing attack thrives, that it finds success continually. Use your backups, Sony Michel, JK, or I should say Joshua Kelly and Horvath to move the ball on the ground, but you got to move the ball vertically this game versus this Jags defensive line. And to do that, I think you need to keep Eckler available on pretty much all passing downs. Quick, decisive passing with a safety valve and elevated personnel usage. That's what I felt was necessary to win this game. And you know what? For the most part, it worked. But not for us. For Jacksonville. That is why I bring up the point of, I said what we needed to do and we didn't do it. Again, it's not because I know football at an elevated level. Absolutely not. Joe Lombardi could, walk circles around me when it comes to football talk and football jargon and the knowledge of the game. But just from an outside perspective, that's what I felt would work. And you know what? I watched it work with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that's what blows my mind. Is a lot, if not everything I listed, is exactly how the Jags attacked us, the Chargers. Quick, decisive passing, attacking the underneath, the sidelines for the most part, too, is what I think I saw on Sunday. A mix of James Robinson on the ground and ETN through the air. That was flawless. A perfect game, almost, called by the Jags versus this Chargers defense, which is still pretty good, right? Again, I'm not an X's and O's guy, but when I saw the Jags use this very strategy against us, I couldn't help but feel that it would have worked for the Chargers as well. And especially given the situation with Justin Herbert, the injury, and who we had available to us, I feel like this is the strategy we needed to use, and it could have been one that finds success. I don't know. But one of the biggest flaws that I'm seeing with Joe Lombardi right now is indeed the play calling, too, right? And the personnel decisions, I meant to say. The play calling and personnel decisions especially. Like, what is happening when it comes to who's on the field for certain plays? The tipped interception to start off the Chargers offense this game. That interception was a pass over the middle to Sony Michel, right? And that's unfortunate. That's one of those unlucky interceptions. You got to come down with that, Sony, but still, tipped off of his hands into the hands of the defender. That sucks. But again, I needed to see Austin Eckler in on this play. All passing plays should include an Austin Eckler as your safety valve. It being Sony Michel, I don't think should have been the case at all. Eckler should have been the force, at the front of this offense this week. And I saw very little of his skill set being put to good use. We know what Austin Eckler is. I think, again, he's off to a slow start, but I think I do attribute a lot of that to not utilizing him properly in the offensive game plan. I feel like you got to use Eckler to his strengths, and I did not see that for the most part on Sunday. But one of the biggest flaws that I'm seeing in Lombardi right now is also with the personnel, right? 3rd and 1. You guys remember that play? It's a pitch to Austin Eckler. Again, I want to see Austin Eckler on the field, but I want to see him as your passing downs guy. And I didn't understand this play call at all. Eckler should be your sword, right? The big swings, the big plays. A guy like Xander Horvath should be your dagger. Go in for those kills, right? Get those 3rd and 1, situations in the hands of a tool or a player that has the skill set to handle that a little bit better. I don't understand why we're not using Xander Horvath. And it feels like I'm constantly scratching my head when it comes to the personnel decisions. I saw many instances where we forced Justin Herbert to attack the sticks, trying to get receivers open, let's say for a first down, but without any help underneath. Why? Well, it's because we had Sony Michel in there. Or we had, Xander Horvath in there instead of Austin Eckler. Why isn't Eckler in on those downs, providing a safety valve for Justin Herbert? I saw gadget plays with low success rates thrown in for kicks and giggles. This doesn't work. I hate those. And finally, I don't understand why we paid Mike Williams $20 million if we're not going to scheme around him, especially in matchups like this where we're missing key players like Keenan Allen. So at this point, I think the seat is officially hot. If I had to take, an official stance on either side, I think Lombardi's seat is officially hot. We've seen Shane Steichen, the former Chargers coach, take his talents to the Eagles, and he's found great success there. And I think a lot of us are a bit gutted by that. But I think the Chargers may have an opportunity to reconcile that a little bit by elevating Shane Day, our quarterbacks coach, to the position of offensive coordinator. He may be able to do the same thing for us. Because this team, when all is said and done, in my opinion, we are a passing team, right? The Chargers, the 2022 Chargers, is a passing offense, right? We are struggling on the ground right now pretty hard. I think a lot of that has to do with our offensive line, but I also do think it has a lot to do with the play calling. And to fix that, I firmly believe that you need to play to your strengths first, right? Don't abandon the run, but you have to lean into your strengths first. And I think the Chargers are a pretty efficient passing offense, but we're not leaning into it. Shane Day, our quarterbacks coach, I feel he understands Justin Herbert better than anybody. And I believe that he could draw up a plan that could unlock Justin Herbert's potential while also keeping him upright. Lean into that strength of a passing attack. And when this team fully accepts and utilizes their strengths as a passing offense, it will open up what they can do on the ground as well. If a team recognizes it, if an opponent recognizes the Chargers as a vicious, air attack kind of team, maybe it will open up opportunities on the ground and help get Sony Michel and Joshua Kelly and even Isaiah Spiller, who's grossly underutilized right now, going on the ground. I do firmly believe that. So yes, Joe Lombardi on the hot seat for me right now. I'm really hoping and praying that he can change and that we see this mentality, lean into the passing offense, find creative ways to get the ball out quick. I hope we see all of these things versus the Texans next week versus Houston, obviously. So there's Joe Lombardi. That's your Joe Lombardi speech for today. Next up, we do have to talk about another hot topic in Brandon Staley. This one may shock some people, but I will tell you guys, I'm out there listening. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm in my own videos in my comment sections. And I'll tell you guys what the hot topics are right now. And Brandon Staley is a hot topic right now. It's time. I need to start by saying that I'm not giving up on Brandon Staley yet, okay? But I do think it's time to open up the topic for discussion. Staley, in my mind, has a ton of potential. And I think he proved that to me last season, right? But this is the year you double down, right? The follow-up year. Show us what you learned in year one. Bring those strengths and those lessons into year two. And so far, unfortunately, I'm not really seeing it. One of the most absurd things that upsets me from the perspective of coaching yesterday was how we handled the Justin Herbert situation. I know Herbert is a dog. He's a tough dude. He's a leader. But letting him stay on the field with Storm Norton protecting his blind side, with so many injuries all over the roster in a game that we lost in the fourth quarter, that was simply a bad call. And I get it. You want to let Justin Herbert control his destiny at some point, give him more control over the team because he's earned it. He's that kind of talent. But at this point, as a coach, you cannot make that risk. This guy's all about analytics. I don't like the risk reward there. We are lucky that Herbert made it out of this game alive, and leaving him in there was a risk just not worth taking. Additionally, I feel like there's a lot of issues I'm seeing that come down to personnel and play calling. A lot of things that we address with the Joe Lombardi section here. Ultimately, it falls on your head coach. It does. It falls on Staley to address. He's got to fix that. And especially when it comes to the personnel decisions, I feel like. These are all things that I felt in some ways were identified and addressed late last season. These are things that we were struggling with last year that I feel like we addressed. We fixed it. And I expected these lessons and these adjustments to carry into the 2022 season, which unfortunately they're back. And that doesn't spell a lot of confidence, at least for me, in a fan's perspective. But I'll tell you what, guys, what the biggest thing that jolted me yesterday and that kind of changed my perspective on this whole coaching situation. The biggest thing that jolted me yesterday is what I learned from our opponent. It was nuts. Doug Peterson is a hell of a head coach. And he had an answer for everything the Chargers were doing yesterday. It was quite impressive, right? Even if they were our opponents and even though we got, stomped on, it was impressive to see Doug Peterson go to work. The never take your foot off the gas mentality, right? The step on their throats mentality. The counter to defense and offense mentality. These are all things that we have preached constantly. These were all practiced by Doug Peterson on Sunday. And this showed me what a guy with his pedigree can do with a roster even like Jacksonville. And on paper, at least, the Chargers roster is so much better when healthy. And this makes me think about what this team could look like with a coach that carries the same traits, the same history, mindset, pedigree. It's impossible not to have these thoughts. And for that, I have to admit, at this point, I'm very open to the idea of Sean Payton joining the Chargers in 2023. That was a jarring experience yesterday. Doug Peterson's a very good coach. And the thought of a guy like that on the Chargers is kind of intense. So for that, I will say I'm open to the idea of Sean Payton in 2023. Of which, if you guys didn't know, he expressed interest with the Chargers this past offseason. I dismissed it immediately because as great as the thought was, I felt Staley had something special in store with how he closed out last year. But with how this season is starting, and after witnessing firsthand what Peterson has done with the Jaguars, it's impossible not to think about what a coach like Sean Payton, what he could do with a superstar roster like the Chargers. It's impossible. He carries too much history, experience, knowledge, and ultimately the pedigree, the track record, to dismiss it any longer. Now, is this what I want to see? Is this what I'm hoping for? Not so much. I want to see Staley rise to the occasion. I want to see Staley fit that role. But if Sean Payton himself wants to come to Los Angeles and coach this team, and at that point the Chargers are struggling from the perspective of their coaching, it's impossible not to entertain that possibility. So to close out this video, guys, my bottom line for this one. The bottom line is that we learned a lot. I think the best thing, the most successful people on this planet are the ones that can take a negative experience and learn from it. And this last one was pretty bad. One of the worst I can remember as a Chargers fan. But it's not all bad, right? There is some good news here that the team's defense is in a good spot, I will say. At least from my perspective, the team's defense looks good. Sure, the game got away from us, and sure, the scoreboard probably says otherwise. But we have to remember, the offense put them in a pretty tough spot constantly throughout this game. Trevor Lawrence was constantly starting drives in very good field position, as well as our offense just could not stay on the field most of that game, which caused the defense to get gassed. I believe with J.C. Jackson returning very soon, Bosa coming back, let's say in the next 3 to 4 weeks, this will help keep this defense in a very nice spot. So if anything, the defense still looks very good in my eyes. But the real problems lie with our offense, play calling, coaching, and health. Right now, the injuries, in my opinion, they look worse than what they really are. And I think over time, it's not going to be as big of an issue. Of course, new things could happen, knock on wood. But as of the players right now and their situation and timelines, it looks worse than it is on the surface. And we have an opportunity to survive these handful of games that are upcoming in the first half of our season to buy our time to get right as far as the injuries. But what will bury us is this team's stubbornness. If we do not take action, if we sit on our hands, if we decide to stay put and do nothing, then everything we accomplished this offseason was for nothing. As of right now, both Joe Lombardi and Brandon Staley are kind of on the hot seat. And with big names like Sean Payton and Shane Day looming over them, a stubbornness to change could ultimately cost them control of their team. Offenses don't win championships. Defenses, I dare say, don't win championships. Rosters don't win championships. Leaders win championships. And right now, this is what the Chargers are desperately lacking. So you guys let me know in the comment section what this team needs. Some of the points that we brought up, maybe points that we didn't bring up. What is going on with the Chargers and how do we turn this around? Because we have done too much. We've invested too much this offseason to let it all go to waste and not make adjustments. The Chargers have cap. The Chargers have expertise on the roster. The Chargers have the ability to change their ways, to change how they're operating this team. They just have to have the willingness to execute that change effectively, might I add. What do you guys think of this whole situation? I'm not giving up, Chargers fans. I firmly believe we can turn this around. But it all stems from the willingness of the team to make these adjustments. I believe they can do it. And I'm optimistic that they will. But the one thing that we need to see right away to give us a step of hope in that direction, the team needs to go find a left tackle. And there are solutions everywhere. The two best, in my opinion, Eric Fisher, Darrell Williams. That'll give you an option at left tackle that is much better than Storm Norton. But if the Chargers sit on their hands, I will have reason to speak up and be upset about it. That is one thing that they cannot do, is sit on their hands when it comes to that offensive line. So with that, guys, let me know what you think in the comments section. Be sure to check out Underdog Fantasy for the game tonight. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Let's at least have fun with that one, and let's try to remain as optimistic as we can. Be mad today, bolt up tomorrow. I think this team can make things right, but action must be taken. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. With that, bolt up, stay frosty, and it's time to take action, Los Angeles Chargers. Do not sit on your hands.